Hello and welcome to First Draft for the month of February. This month we are talking about tackling our rewrites after our critique partners have gotten a handle on our manuscripts for the first time. Before we get started though, we're going to go around the room like we do every month and say hello. And I will start with Julia today.
Hi, I'm Julia Kelly, and I am now also Julia Blake. We've announced a new pen name for my contemporary work, so I'm operating under two identities right now. And I'm drinking a nice red from Italy that I can't pronounce, as we discovered in the pre-show. And that's me tonight.
Mary Chris.
I'm Mary Chris Escobar, I'm feeling very much like I need a pen name. I think I'm going to create one soon. Anyway,
should join the pool.
Multiple names. And I am drinking an Allagash table beer. Allagash is one of my favorite breweries, and this is a new beer from them. So super exciting.
Perfect. And I'm Alexis Ham. And tonight I am drinking a whiskey. I know everyone's really shocked by this because I drink a whiskey almost every show. And I wanted to show you guys, it's this new whiskey called Tin Cup. And it's really cool because it comes with a tin cup. And I was just, I'm really taken with that. It's a lot of fun. But here's the actual drink. And it has tonic and water in it. Just want to clarify like I do every month.
We're drinking it straight, guys.
Right. My favorite was the time you had a glass this size.
Yes.
And you were like, it's whiskey. You were like, just whiskey.
Pint glass.
We're really well represented tonight with the wine and whiskey and beer.
We are. It's like we planned it. Because there's a little secret to First Draft. We plan very little. We try to keep the show fresh and interesting and just whatever comes off the top of our heads. And that includes our drinks.
I would say we plan next to nothing, about as next to nothing as we can get.
It's the charm of it.
Sure. Yeah, that's our selling point.
Yes.
And
also, if you're watching instead of listening, we also did not coordinate the fact that we were all essentially wearing the same thing tonight.
We made Julia change her headset, though, so that one of us would look different.
So you could tell us apart.
True.
And for those of you listening, we're all wearing black, essentially. Yeah.
And I look like a telemarketer from the 80s, they told me earlier, so there you go.
She does. She looks exactly like my childhood with all the commercials. Hello? How can I assist you?
Yeah, I feel like we need to break into a commercial. We need to let you do all the book talk at the end because you can just promo it like you're the announcer.
Yes. And because we planned so little, we knew the show was coming up this week and we didn't have a topic. So we threw it out to you guys, our audience. And we did get a suggestion for the show this week from Jess L on Twitter. And she suggested that we do how to organize and tackle your rewrite after your crit partner has had its way with your MS, your manuscript. So that's what we're talking about tonight. And to kick things off, I'm going to throw it out to you guys. How much rewriting do you end up doing when you get your notes back from your critique partner? Julia just starts laughing.
Right, Chris, you go first.
I mean, it depends on the project, I think, but I have certainly done significant rewrites based on what critique partners notice. I mean, it can be everything from, did you realize you had two characters named the same thing? Which I've definitely done. Which is a super quick, find and replace for one of them. To entire scenes that don't work, or feeling like maybe there's a different place to start your book. I feel like I've maybe even had that, or a different place to start a chapter. So I think it really depends on the project. It probably also depends on how much time I've put into the editing before I send it to a critique partner. Probably also makes a difference.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm going to lump in critique partners and editors in this one, because the reality is that it really depends on the project, like Mary Chris said. I think the other thing that matters is where you are in the project. So it's very different if I send one of you guys a truly, truly raw first draft that's just like a tell me what you think, I'm really worried that I'm writing a character everybody's going to hate, and it's just kind of really broad sweeping notes. And then there are things that get down into the really, really nitty gritty line edit type of stuff. And so it really depends on what you're working with. I know when I write a first draft, I usually tend to write a very spare first draft, and I've been dictating this book that I'm working on right now because I was kind of stuck. and I needed to do something a little different. So I started telling myself the book out loud, and I've been going back and looking through scenes and filling in details, because it's been a very light kind of skim of the scenes. So there's a lot of building that goes back through it. So I imagine if I were to give you guys this book after kind of first pass through, there would be quite a lot of notes on it. I've also had situations where I've pulled a full 20,000 words out of a book. So it really just kind of depends on what you're working with, and also what kind of critique partner you're working with. If it's somebody like you guys who I know really well and feel very comfortable sending earlier stuff to, it's very different than like an early reader situation where it's more of the book is in ARC form and we're pretty much ready to go, and I just want to make sure that it gets some more eyes on it in case there's some really big red flags that I've missed.
Yeah, I've noticed that I relied very heavily on critique partners in the beginning because I think you're still learning a lot about the process and what works and what doesn't work. And at this point, especially within a series that's 5 and 6 books in, you kind of get the final draft almost, because it's like, this is a formula. I know what I'm doing. I'm doing the same thing I did the last 5 books. So I just need you to make sure I didn't do something stupid.
Mm-hmm. Do you all have specific questions that you give critique partners or beta readers, or does that vary?
It definitely varies by project.
Yeah.
No, it's true. Then there are certain things that you get more worried about in certain projects than others. Mm-hmm. Anytime I'm writing outside of my comfort zone, I'm always a little bit more nervous about, am I saying something that's not coming out the way that I mean it to? Is this character such a far departure from my personality or my personal experience that I maybe want to make sure that I'm getting extra sets of eyes on things to make sure I'm catching those problematic points. I think it really all depends. Everything depends on everything.
It is
the answer to this whole show.
It is very dependent, because if you're working on a character where there's a flaw or something that you're really worried about, but you've been dealing with it for so long, you need that fresh set of eyes to say, yes, this is still a problem, or no, what crazy are you talking about here? They're your gauge as to whether or not what you've spent all this time worrying about and thinking about and living inside of this one character's head for so long, did it work or not?
I think for me, a lot in the beginning, also, I was really concerned about pace. So I'd ask my critique partners a lot about, tell me where you feel like it's slow. Tell me where you feel like it's too fast. Because it is very possible to be too fast, especially as you're like a snowball speeding down the hill towards the ending. And you're just picking up steam and picking up steam. It's actually very possible to suddenly it's abruptly the ending and your reader's like, but that wasn't satisfying because I didn't get to actually experience any of that with the characters. So pace is a really big question also. And I still, from time to time, will sit there and be like, it's just off. I just need somebody to read it so that they can tell me what's boring about this book. Because you read it and you live with it for so long that I think it's difficult sometimes to separate yourself from what you're actually reading and what you think you're reading in your head.
Definitely. I tend to go the opposite way. I tend to write really quiet. And so there's typically like chunks I can just cut that are just internal dialogue, or like things that I've said 5,000 times that aren't advancing the plot in any way. Like I mean, one of the things I do in my own editing, and then I always ask critique partners to look for, is going back and pulling out basically dead chapters where like nothing happens. And they were vital to my writing process because they were vital to developing a character or figuring something out, but like they do nothing for the story. Like they're totally boring to someone who hasn't been immersed in that world in the way I have.
I totally get that. All right, from an organizational standpoint, you get this critique back. What's the first thing that you do?
I look at all the comments. I open it up almost immediately, and I just go straight for the comment bubbles in Word. And what I'll usually do is I really like getting feedback back. I have a journalism background, and I'm used to getting a lot of feedback back from editors and various people, and I am an editor now. And so I like to look at what the initial reaction was, which is why sometimes I'll send it to people who aren't romance writers or in the business and are just friends who have a raw reaction to something. I have one friend in particular, her name is Catherine, and she's great with just immediate, like, visceral reaction to things, very strong, either positively or negatively. And so I'll read those through and I shut the document and I set it aside and I don't look at it for another day. And I like that sink in process. That really helps me. So that's not an organizational thing so much as, actually just getting kind of the first blush reaction. And then I'll start going through and I build what I call a fix all the shit list. And so I literally head it with that. And then I go through and I make a list of all the major things that I need to do. And then I prioritize that list. And so it's like character changes, cutting scenes, somebody's eye color was wrong. And so I need to go back and fix that. And then I'll go through and I'll start non-linearly knocking those things off the list. So I edit when I first do a big edit. I jump in mid-scene, mid-chapter, mid-book. I'll edit the end, I'll edit the front, whatever, and then I'll go through and I'll just check all those things off that list. Because I found when I started to edit from start to finish, I would get about midway through and then my energy would flag and I would never be as good at editing the end of the book as I was about editing the beginning of the book. And so it was really causing the book to suffer. And so by doing it non-linearly and then going through and doing what I call continuity read to make sure everything that you've taken out or added in makes sense with everything else and it knits together as a book, I find that to be really, really helpful. So that's kind of how I go from critique partner comments or editor comments to having a new fresh draft of the book.
I am linear. I go linear.
Super linear.
Yeah.
I know both of you were staring at me like, what? And I thought I was too, but no, it really helps me. But no, I completely understand being linear because I was for years.
Yeah. No, I mean, that being said, if I get to, so I'll just linearly, that's a tough word to say. Anyway, I will work through in a linear manner the comments. And if I get to one that is sort of overarching about the whole thing, like needing to change an eye color or needing to change a name because there's two people with that name, I'll just go ahead and do that wholesale. So like if I was going through that and that was a comment on chapter 2, page 3, I would stop and I would make that change through the whole novel at that one point, especially if it was one of those find and replace kind of changes. But I tend to work through the comments and the changes as they go.
Can I ask, what if they're big picture versus small stuff? Like, so if we're talking about moving scenes or like major character development arcs or anything like that?
Yeah, I was trying to think about that as you were talking, because I do feel like I have jumped around on that kind of thing before. I think probably when I get to the first place where that comes up, I stop and sort of try to fix it throughout, would be my thought on that. 'Cause, yeah, I do think I do sort of do a big thing like that over the whole thing before I would go back and tackle small things.
I
don't know if that made any sense.
No, it does.
I do what you did, Julia, and I read through all the comments when I first get it, and then I close it and I have to walk away because I'm like, but, I get that emotional, like, but she was supposed to fall in love with him in that scene. What do you mean it was too soon? And then you have to walk away and you have to think about it and let it sit in. And then after like 24 hours, like, oh, I get it now.
God, they're so right.
And
yeah.
And from there, because I've already looked at everything, I know if there's a big picture issue, and I will tackle anything. It's almost in like a tier system, I guess. Is there anything huge that I have to worry about? Is there anything that I need to worry about moving or adjusting? And once any big picture stuff is done, then I start at the beginning and I go through and I do all of the linear edits after I've cleared away anything big, which is hopefully not the case.
Yeah.
They're a pain. They really are.
Anytime anybody says,
anytime somebody says, I don't think your character's motivation is believable because X, that is a really, really
that's
big
when you get out the bottle.
Yeah, you get out the tin cup and then you start just drinking heavily. No, because it's a fundamental change to the whole structure of the book. Because if you're writing women's fiction or you're writing romance, they are incredibly character-based books. So everything depends on the reactions of those characters and the motivations of those characters. And so I'm lucky I haven't had a change like that in a while, but I've had them and they are really tough.
And if you
They're
get
really
it
tough and really right, if you get it right, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm. I was just gonna say, if you do get that note, you hope you get it early. So you're like, okay, there's not so much more like that I have to. I mean, if you get that 3/4 of the way into the book, it's kind of like, whoa, that is a lot of going back to make her motivated.
And the book is due in 5 days. I can't sleep for 5 days.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Really try to avoid that if possible. Ooh.
So we're talking about tracking changes, which is obviously something that is going to take place in Word. Do you do most of your work in Word, or are you a Scrivener person, or is there something else? Mary Chris.
I write my draft and do my initial edit in Scrivener, and then I pull it out and use Word for everything else.
I do my initial draft in Scrivener. I do my personal first edits in Scrivener, and then I will do developmental edits in Scrivener. So my editor gets me back a draft in Word, and what I do is I'll set my iPad up with Word on it, because now my iPad reflects Word track changes, which is like the best thing ever. And so I'll kind of dual monitor it a little bit. And what I'll do is I'll take the Scrivener document and I'll manually enter all of the changes, because often my editor will do somewhat of a line edit while she's reading, just because she's going through it anyway. So I'll get the big picture developmental edits, and then I'll also get some of the line edits. And so I will do a side by side and enter in every single painful little word. And it really, what I do for that with Scrivener is I change the revision color. So I'll make the revision color red or blue or whatever. And it helps me as I figure out how much, I like to see how much of the draft I've actually rewritten, which by the time I go through is usually quite a lot of it. But it helps me kind of process that. And then once that's done, and once I've done as many of the big revisions, the kind of big picture stuff I was talking about, I'll export it to Word, and then I'll start working in Word from then on. So I'll do the continuity edit in Word and just read it. And often I'll do something as simple as change the font, so at least it looks a little different. For whatever reason, I do find that to be helpful in catching typos and various, things like that, grammatical issues. But after that point, I pretty much am only in Word, because all the copy edits I get back and all the proof stuff, it's all going to be reflected that way. So.
Well, and I actually like what you're saying there, because sorry.
Go for it.
I'm like thinking I may do this differently next time, because the reason I always do my initial edit in Scrivener is because I write in scenes in Scrivener. I don't know how everyone else is using it, but that allows me to drag and drop. Like, I'm pretty sure the book I'm working on now starts totally at the wrong place, and it's going to be super easy to fix. Well, not super easy, but slightly easier to fix that by just dragging a scene around. So I can see how doing the developmental edit in Scrivener would make those big changes easier.
Yes.
And then doing the line by line in Word. Makes sense.
I'm the odd man out here. I still write in Word, and I only use Scrivener as a tool.
I know that. Oh, that's right. I always forget about that, because I know you use it so heavily for EPUBs and things like that. Or you did before, I guess, Vellum. Yeah.
Yeah. Scrivener is really just a tool that I use for brainstorming, and when I'm working on multiple projects, I go ahead and when a scene comes to me, I write it, because you can move the scenes around so easily. So you can just have projects going. And then if I'm working on a project, which I'm probably going to have to do with the one that I'm writing right now, where I know I've kind of touched on a few scenes, but I never finished them because I was just kind of like hopping my way through until I got to the big picture of what I was really excited to work on. Those scenes need a lot of work. So I end up pasting them into Scrivener and chopping them up into their chapters, and then I can move them around and edit them that way, and then I pop it back out to Word. But I worked in Word for years. I did lots of nonfiction writing from my old career in Word. It's just something that's old and familiar and comfortable. And now with Scrivener's iPad option, I can write on the go anytime with Scrivener, and it's super easy, and it's just I just go back and forth between Word and Scrivener a lot, but I don't write in Scrivener because it doesn't track the spelling changes, and it drives me crazy.
No, it is terrible with that. And I have to say, I wish they would improve the functionality on that, because it is a big frustration, and it normalizes a lot of words that are not right. Yes. And it does not like other words that are right. And it's very frustrating. The dictionary is not nearly as robust. I think for me, a lot of what you guys are talking about with moving scenes around was hugely helpful. I know the reason I abandoned Word was because I would lose parts of my book. I would just, if I had to do major movement or anything like that, I would just full on lose chapters and find them like weeks later when I was going through the draft. And I just had no idea how to, and so being able to split and move really seamlessly was worth the learning curve that it took to learn Scrivener. And I'm sure we could do a whole show on Scrivener.
We probably should.
And probably should. We keep saying this. We probably
I'm
should
writing
do the
it
show.
down.
I was just getting ready to do that too.
You do it too. One of us will remember.
Because I think the trick, and I mean, this would go in that show, but like, there's so many different things you can do with it. It can be really overwhelming if you think that you need to do everything it can do. And clearly, like, we're all using it in slightly different ways. My favorite thing about it is, much like you're talking about, Julia, if you're deleting things. So as I mentioned, I end up always deleting a ton of stuff. But I'm also always surprised how much I want to dig back into that for little snippets. And it's super easy to have a trash folder in Scrivener. Like, I used to have a separate trash document in Word that I like would throw the things, because I don't.
Cut
while
scenes.
I'm working
That's
on
what
a
our
draft.
called.
Cut scene. Yeah, I think
is-
mine's called trash. Cut scene is so much nicer. I'm gonna
That
rename
makes
it.
me feel better about myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So we should definitely do a show, because there's 1,000 ways.
Yeah,
to use
Scrivener is so powerful and can be used in so many different ways, and you guys use it so differently from I do, but I still can't be a writer without it, even though we use it so differently. So now we talked about track changes, and I know before the show, because we talk before the show and you guys don't hear what we say, that we all do the same thing, where we don't just accept track changes in the same document. We have the dual monitors or the iPad, and we look through every change that's suggested by our critique partner or editor, and we put them in manually. I know that for me, I originally did that because there was a whole bunch of coding stuff in the document that if it got left behind, it created really funky EPUBs, and I didn't want to have to deal with all that. But it became such a good habit, just like when I was learning to write in the first place, when my English teacher would have us write out scenes. When you're actually putting in the edits yourself, even stupid little things like commas and it should have been the and a is missing. How did you miss the word I in the sentence? You get really intimately involved with exactly what you were doing wrong, which teaches you not to do it wrong the next time, hopefully. and those edits sometimes make you more aware of other things maybe your critique partner didn't get. What about you guys?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a lot of those things. It's a lot of my brain professionally goes to AP style because that's what we use in news. And so there are certain things that are conventions in the news world that are not conventions in the literary world. And so a lot of it is just learning how style and learning what my editor likes and learning what the copy editor likes, because copy editors are incredible and they just have so much more knowledge of the English language as a whole than I do. So a lot of that
ever
helps.
Want to.
Or I ever want to. And I found that when I was just going into a document and accepting track changes without doing the dual monitor thing, it's really easy to just start clicking and just start accepting and accepting and accepting things. And that's not what I wanted to do, because there are things that I want to set. There are things that I want to keep and change and really continue to work with the document and work with the book as it goes through. So no, I find also if you are trying out a new critique partner and it's somebody who's not gelling with you, you don't want to make those changes. And so you want to leave those behind. And that's a whole another set of reasons why you might want to kind of have control over that main document yourself, and kind of just say, you know what, maybe this relationship didn't work out as well as I'd hoped it would as a critique partner, and maybe I find somebody else, but that's a learning experience too.
Yeah. So I completely agree. I think I maybe didn't, when we were talking before the show, I didn't really distinguish. I do accept changes on copy edits.
Oh yeah,
but
that's different.
Yeah, that's totally different. Yeah.
So now I still don't wholesale accept changes on that.
No,
and that's partially because I have a great copy editor who will occasionally put something in like, I don't think that happened in that episode of Friends. Like she'll catch little things like that. So obviously I'm going to read through and make those changes by hand. But like a, than, the, there, I'm famous for messing up there and there, even though I do swear I know the difference. Like it just slides off my fingers wrong. Like those I'll go through and just accept changes on those in the document. But definitely when I'm getting feedback from critique partners or like a developmental edit on something, I do the dual monitor and they enter the changes because I want to look at all of it and really understand what I'm doing. And so as a result, most people who've critiqued for me will catch some of those little grammatical things. So like I do make those myself. But if it's truly that final copy edit, I do use track changes and accept all those because I'll be honest, I would miss them like if I didn't.
Oh yeah, sometimes there's just so many.
It's comments. Yeah,
right.
Or it's just like one on a page and it doesn't jump out to you because you've looked at 200 pages of this stuff and you're just like.
But I get excited. Do you ever get excited when you have those pages and you're like, there was only one?
Yeah.
What's wrong?
Are you kidding? When it stops bleeding red every time I look at it, yes, I get very excited.
Mm-hmm.
Very much
just
so.
As a cautionary tale, I've read probably 3 books now where a line has been really weird. And I've realized now at this point in my career, it's because they just accepted a track change and there was a word wrong at the beginning of the track change. And it's all wrong now. And it didn't get caught in copy edits or whatever it was before it went to publication. So even when you're just accepting the track changes, do make sure you're paying attention.
Yes, absolutely.
And I walk away from it.
No, I think that's smart. I was going to say it's really easy to get overwhelmed. So if you take breaks, that's the best way to go about it, I think.
Well, I think it's easy to do what you were just talking about, Julia, where you just do, and you're like listening to music and you're just like, and so, I'll intentionally do like 2 chapters. And even if I just get up and walk around my house or read a chapter of something else or right. Like, or move location. So like I'm in a different place. Yeah. Cause you can definitely get in that just like, and you'll miss one.
Yes.
I respond really well to word counts when I'm writing drafts. And I found I'm really not, I haven't found a system that I like for editing yet in terms of tracking editing. Like pages don't really equate because 20 pages of one thing can be 4 hours and 20 pages of another thing can be 4 weeks, like in terms of trying to unpick not 4 weeks, but trying to unpick all the problems with a scene or a character or whatever. You might rewrite things over and over and over again. And so I find that I literally on a sheet of paper write down 1 through 26 or however many chapters I have, and I go through and I cross out and I cross out and I cross out as I go through, so I can see, okay, I've done 5 chapters. I have to do 21 more chapters. And I find that keeps me on track, but it also reminds me, okay, if I've done 2 or 3 chapters, I need to get up. I need to do something else. I need to read. I need to watch a little TV, and then I'm going to sit back down again. So I usually break editing weekends into 4 sessions. So one morning, one evening on each day, and try to break it up into chunks and give myself enough time. Sometimes you don't have the luxury for that. So, that all goes out the window. But if possible, I just get overwhelmed by how much stuff you have to read through, and it's your own stuff, and you've read it so many times at this point, and dear God, I just want another reader who is not me to read it. But the reality is the responsibility falls with you because it's your book. So
I find that on those weekends, it's a good time to start a new series on Netflix. And so if I get through 3 chapters and I need a break, I get to go watch an episode.
It's like incentive.
So basically, like, it's hilarious to listen to this because this is all the things in my other non-writing job that I talk to students about as far as good study skills. So clearly, the things that you learn as good study skills are useful above and beyond, especially if you decide to be a writer.
We're doing good stuff. We're not doing bad.
No, you're doing excellent stuff.
That's great. Okay, I'm
like
really
you're taking
now.
frequent breaks and you're setting rewards for yourself once you.
So I'm a kindergartner.
No, these are college students. You're still you're.
No, I know, but I feel like that's exactly. I feel like when I was a child, my mother used to bribe us to get us to do certain things. So yes, that I always feel like I'm bribing myself, but now I feel like it's been sanctioned by somebody who knows how to do this with college students. So
there you go. It is. As an adult, you just have to bribe yourself because no one else is going to bribe you.
Exactly.
And the bribes are better. Let's be honest. You can bribe yourself with beer or Netflix.
Chocolate.
Not the students. Don't bribe yourself with beer.
No.
Unless you're a senior or a grad student. Not condoning that.
Well, we're almost out of time, but we did have one last thing on the list, which was, what do you do with suggestions that do and don't overlap from your critique partner?
Oh, you mean when they're fighting each other without knowing it?
My favorite is when on the exact same line or part, one person loved it and one person hated it. And you're like, well, what do I do now?
I need a third person.
Throw more voices into this.
Yeah. Well, I think the easiest to tackle there is if they agree, that's a beautiful thing. And I think the most interesting thing is when one thing you really want to pay attention to if you're getting a critique back and you're having that initial reaction of, I don't know, I like it. Like you said earlier, Lexi, like I thought they were totally in love, or, like whatever it was. But if you're getting the same feedback from two people, that's a really good sign that you probably need to look at that. Like if you're getting, so I think when people agree, that's the easiest. And even better if you agree also and you're like, yes, that clearly needs to be changed. But the disagreeing thing, I don't know, that's an interesting question.
I usually flag those and leave them for a little bit and kind of let it sit for a moment and try to figure out, it's really hard, but try to figure out what it is that is going to serve the book best. And that's not always what it is that you like the most. So I just got notes back from a friend on the book that I am line editing right now. And there's a metaphor that I love in there. I just love it. And it's been in there since I wrote this book like 4 years ago. And she put a note on it and she said, "It really didn't work for me. It didn't make sense." And I was just like, damn it.
Oh, you're going to have to tell me after the show.
And I want to know what line it is.
Yeah. It's really hard to admit that because it's something that, it's something that gut instinct wise, my immediate reaction was, oh God, but the reality is that it's not that I have to pay attention to it and read it and understand it. I have to get somebody else who has not had this story in front of them before read this and understand it and understand the motivations and all these different things. So sometimes that means sucking it up and kind of pulling I hate this expression, but pulling your big girl panties up.
Oh, I was going to use that when it was my turn to talk. So cool.
Oh. I hated it so much, but it's so accurate. Like you just have to suck it up and you just have to admit sometimes that you are wrong. Your critique partner is right. Because there's no point in having a critique partner if you're just going to throw everything they say out the window, you're wasting everybody's time. Now, by the same token, you also need to be aware that some people are going to have a better idea of your career, your books, and your process than other people are. So you want to be protective over who you're allowing into that early into your process. So just a word to the wise. And we can talk, I think we've done a show on critique partners like years ago, because at this point we have done years of shows.
I was looking at our SoundCloud and it said something like we have 32 shows on there. And I was like, what?
It's a lot of shows, and we were doing shows before we were putting shows on SoundCloud too, which is
I think I put most of the back ones on, but
did you put them all back on? Okay, yeah. So anyway, but you were going to talk about panties too.
Oh, so I think especially early on, it's very easy to think that everybody's advice is correct, and you quickly learn that it is not. And you do have to put on your big girl panties and say, no, your advice is stupid. I'm keeping this. And sometimes you have to put on your big curl panties and say, oh, crap. I have to change this. But I usually end up, and my husband will tell you that this is the stage where I say you also, beside a critique partner, you also need an emotional partner. Because there's something in every book where you guys will read it and say, no, I'm sorry, it's got to go. And I'm like, no. And I lay on the bed.
I just understand.
I lay on the bed and all by myself crying about, I have to get rid of this. And he's like, really? It's going to be okay. It was one line.
I have another folder for that. I was talking about my folders. I have a folder called, it's that kill your darlings phrase.
Yep, exactly.
I have a dead darlings folder. And so when I have those things.
Oh my God.
When I have those things that like make me want to cry because I think they're so beautiful, but they don't serve the story, I put them in my dead darlings folder. I will also, just as a side note, tell you exactly how many times I've actually looked at that folder. 0.
So you lived, even though you cut those lines.
I lived, and I never thought about them again because I don't have time to go look at my dead darlings folder, I'll be honest.
I will admit.
But it made me feel better.
That there was probably one, it's possibly two, but I'm pretty sure it was just one time I just said screw it and left it in.
Yeah.
Because
sure, you know what, sometimes you're going to have that moment of being like, you know what, I like it, and I'm the author, and I get to decide to do this.
exactly. It was like,
Well,
I'm doing me right now.
It's an experiment you can run too. I mean, did a reader ever like critique you for that, or send you a message and say like, this was just not, yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think like that's an experiment you can run, because if you had then gotten a ton of negative feedback about that, you would have been like, well, maybe not the right decision.
Exactly. All right, guys, we are over time, so we should probably wrap this up. Is there anything else you want to throw in? No? Okay. Well, then let's wrap this up and say our goodbyes. We'll go opposite from how we started, and we'll start with Mary Chris.
All right. Well, again, Mary Chris Escobar. You can find me at marychrisescobar.com. I am not really frantically, I'm working on a novel, and I'll be sending updates quarterly on that to readers, including excerpts, and maybe I'll put some of those deleted Dead Darling scenes in there for you.
Perfect.
Yes.
So sign up for my newsletter to stay abreast of everything that's going on.
Fabulous. Julia?
I'm Julia Kelly and Julia Blake. Julia Kelly, I have a bunch of historical romances that are out right now, the Governess series, and you can also pre-order my first Julia Blake title, which is called Changing the Play. It is a football romance about an agent and a sports reporter who is going after her big client ahead of the NFL draft. So it's really exciting. Just went up for pre-order. No cover yet, but that is coming soon, and hopefully I'll get to show it off sometime in the near future.
So excited.
Yay.
And I'm Alexis Ann. I am deep in the Summer Heat Cave, which is the fifth book in the Storm Inside series, and that'll be out this March. There'll be a big cover reveal and pre-order coming soon, so pay attention for that. That's all we have tonight for First Draft. Thank you for watching or listening. If you are watching us on YouTube, we'd really appreciate a thumbs up on the show. If you're listening to us on iTunes, if you could leave us a review, that would be fabulous. And if you're on SoundCloud, you can heart us. That would be great. If you have any ideas for upcoming shows, we would love to hear them so that we can give you what you want. We're here for that. Have a great February, and we will be back in March.
Bye.
Bye.